excited about this information and this research that we've been doing here at Club Benchmarking. We're so excited to be sharing this. We think this is a very powerful subject, and there's a lot of information that can be useful and taken throughout your club and also actionable after this. So today I'm joined here with Dr. Jim Butler, who is our CEO. Myself, I am Mike Morin. I've been with the company exactly 1 year today. Extremely excited about it and haven't regretted it a single moment. You can see here, this is the agenda for today. Some things that we're going to touch upon, mainly employee engagement, and some different things that we're doing here at Club Benchmarking, and some takeaways for you to take with you after this webinar.
All right, congratulations, first of all, Mike, on your 1 year anniversary. So I was remiss in not saying that to you this morning. So this is a slide, this is Jim Butler. This is a slide that as we were going through preparing for this that we thought was kind of funny, and I'll let you read that. But you know, as a manager, we know that it can be painful at times to hear people and what the feedback is. But we also know that in today's world, it's very important that not only do we get feedback, but after we get that feedback from our employees, that we actually do something about it. One of the things that we hear, and one of the things that I heard as a manager a lot of, was that our employees sometimes feel like they're not being listened to. And in any surveying, when you give a survey or you get information from employees, it's really important that you take action. Let's go to the next slide. And one of the times we were sitting back at Club Benchmarking, and Mike and I, which we are apt to do, spent a lot of time talking about why we do things and why we don't do things. And in the old days, Letterman used to have his top 10 reasons, which were always pretty funny. So we thought we would combine the two, about the 5 reasons why I wouldn't do a club employee survey, and then the opposite of that, of why I would. And reason number 1 is the importance of the employees, right? They're very important to us. They're the most important part of our business, and if we're not listening to them and not being engaged with them, we really are subject to having people leave. Reason number 2 is, as we know, is labor is such a big part of our business. We are in the service business. It's well over 50% of most of our budgets. It's our number 1 expense. So therefore, we need to treat it as such as we go forward. Reason number 3 is, you know, do you actually care how your employees feel about it? If you have a low unemployment rate, you may not care because it's easy to get people. If people are idly, if they're not employed and they're easy to get, it's easy to hire. You probably aren't necessarily that concerned about it, but you can replace them. In today's world, with unemployment under 4%, it's probably pretty important that you understand how people feel about it. Reason number 4 is, God forbid, we don't have a perfect organization, right? I think we all are trying to continuously improve our organization. And if you want to know what's going on, I always felt like at my club, I always would go to the source, to the people that were actually on the front line. It's really important as an organization that we improve on a daily basis. And then reason number 5 is obviously the attraction. If you're going to train your staff and you're at a terrific place and you get the reputation for being a great manager and great human resource and great training, your employees will be apt to leave. We know the market, we saw with the labor statistics this past month that the cost of labor is actually going up. Some of the wages are starting to increase. And if you're in a competitive club market, which I was in Naples, where there's over 100 other clubs, not only will the other clubs hire them away, but obviously the restaurants and the hotels will also do it. So there's plenty of incentives and reasons why we want to get involved in our employee engagement surveys.
So next you see a few things about the staff. We've done a lot of research so far, doing a bunch of, we've Googled a bunch of things. We've checked out, now Google Scholar is my number one thing. Jim has forced me to continuously look at different research articles and dissertations, and these are a few things that we've taken from this about the staff. A few things that stick out to me, bottom right, top second one from the bottom right. People want to know they matter and they want to be treated as people. They're new talent contract. Also, your number one customers are your people. Look after employees first and then customers last. I saw an awesome one by Richard Branson recently that was train your employees so they want to leave, but treat them well enough so they don't. So these are all great things that kind of focus around how do we listen to the employees, how do we continuously engage them, and then also be brand representation for our clubs.
Yeah, and Mike, one of the experiences that I had as a manager, I got invited to the 25th opening of the Naples Ritz. They were celebrating the 25-year anniversary. And we tell our staff that they matter with both verbal clues and also nonverbal clues. And as we were sitting there getting ready for the anniversary, and there was all sorts of dignitaries there, from the governor of the state of Florida to the mayor of Naples and city council people and state representatives. As we sat down to open the ceremony, the first thing that they did was bring in the staff that had been at the facility since day one, and they took 15 or 20 minutes, and the very first thing that they did in that facility was recognize the employees that had been there. They called them by name, called them up, shook their hands, and took the time. And in the audience, I was sitting in the audience, and I always remember thinking to myself, what a great representation of that brand. And they took a moment and thanked the staff, and I know that it was really heartfelt. And one of the takeaways that I think we can take from that as managers is at the annual meetings that we have with our members about recognizing your staff at that annual meeting. And that will go a long ways, and it doesn't cost you any money, and it just shows people from a recognition standpoint how important that they are.
Awesome. So we're going to start off by defining employee engagement. You'll constantly see the word engagement thrown around, associating satisfaction with engagement. So we want to start by defining that. Essentially what it is a relationship between an employee and its club. So how do you build that relationship where they are loyal, where they want to represent the brand in the full way? Everything that they do for the club is absorbed in their work. So right here, this is just going on Google and searching employee engagement, and we found this awesome definition that really captures what employee engagement truly is.
This is a slide about an engaged employee and an employee that is not engaged. And one of the focuses today that we're going to talk about is that the managers can make a difference in how engaged an employee is. According to a recent Gallup poll, employee engagement at a 70% clip is enhanced by the manager or by the leader of the organization. So when we look at the first three of those, an engaged employee has somebody that has talked about their progress, encourages their development, and has praised them recently. Those are generally come from either a supervisor or a manager or somebody else, and you can see how striking of a difference it is between an engaged employee in the high 80s, low 90s, and an unengaged employee from 10 to 13. One of the takeaways that we have, one of the things that one of my mentors taught me to do was every month send out a list of your direct report employees and make sure that you track how recently that you had praised them. And we know that praise needs to be specific, and it needs to be heartfelt, and it needs to be meaningful. But you also need to make sure that you track that. We find that many times managers think that they're giving out more praise, or the employee doesn't feel like they're being praised as often as they have. Other things that are important in engagement is that opportunity to learn and grow. One of the challenges that we have in the club industry is that many times the opportunity to grow and be promoted is not very big, because we're a relatively flat organization where we don't have a lot of hierarchy in that. So we have to make sure that we grow people and learn people and take care of people as they go through. The biggest difference when we look at this list is, as you go down about 3/4 of the way, is that their opinions count at work. So an engaged employee, 91% of them believe that their opinions count, and only 19% feel that they're unengaged and their opinions don't count. So I really look hard at that one, about how you listen to people. You know, is your door open? A lot of the comments that we get on the surveys are that the managers and the leaders keep their door closed. They're not out and about with the staff as much. They need to make sure that they are working with them and listening to them and tell them what to do. Now, when we get down to the bottom of the list there, and we look at the equipment and what is expected of them, the employees, the engaged employees, the unengaged employees feel pretty good about that. So you can see the differences between engagement is really about leadership and really about the supervisors and the managers. We all know that the employees have to participate in that, but think about your own cases where you've had a terrific manager or supervisor or fellow worker, and what was really important. You know, according to our research, again, it goes back to people with praise, that people feel like they're respected, that their opinions count, and that they have some opportunity to grow. And all those things are generally driven by the club and or the supervisor.
So this is a excerpt taken from some research that we found by MIT, measuring the benefits of employee engagement. We thought this was unbelievable. Very powerful stuff, and kind of changing your opinion, because if you think about it, the one thing that we harp on is your payroll expense. So you have 56% of your payroll, or of your expenses, goes to the employees, goes to payroll, taxes and benefits. So instead of looking at that as a cost, why don't we start looking at that as a resource? So we thought this was awesome. Employees are the face of the business and the sources of innovation, organizational knowledge. They interact with customers at every touch point, create lasting brand impressions. They personify the company's service philosophy and are expected to live by its cultures and its values. While the products and the services many companies offer can appear quite similar on the surface, exceptional service can be a competitive advantage. Competing through service is only possible when the organization treats its employees as a valuable resource. We thought that was great, especially in the club industry, how the lifeblood of many organizations and clubs come down and boil down to the staff. So another thing that I came across, I don't remember exactly where I got this quote from, but what employees think is not to be feared, it's to be harnessed. So going back a few slides to what Jim said, how do we start to listen? How do we change our mind frame and start to listen? One way is through employee surveys, and this is what employee surveys can do. They provide an audience for employees. It gives them the ability to voice their opinions. It gives them the ability to contribute to club culture and take a sense of ownership. I love seeing that line, because they can sit there and be upset, but why don't you put it back on them sort of and say, hey, why don't we all take ownership? Why don't we hear your feedback? Why don't we understand what you're going through? And that way we can work together to build a workplace culture that suits your needs and best for you. that also increases engagement and commitment because it shows that you're listening. It's also We've also found that the information correlates through the club in many ways that you wouldn't expect. So through Dr. Butler's research with member loyalty and satisfaction, he's done that survey many times for clubs for the whole membership, but also new members. And always in the top 3 reasons for joining or coming to the club are the staff. And some of that, if you think about it, new members that we've surveyed are only there for 4 months and have probably created very little lasting relationships, but it's still the staff that makes a difference for them wanting to join. And so focusing that and putting your resources to creating a better workplace culture will benefit you in more ways than you think. Surveys also create a benchmark or a baseline, so it's something to work off of. So if you have yet to do a survey in any form, whether it's in-house or third party, how do you continuously make decisions around your workplace culture without a baseline or something to work off of? And also, if you are putting initiatives in place and you go to look at it 6 months down the road or a year, where do you know, how do you actually know where you started from and if you've enhanced it or decreased it? So it creates that baseline. It also, to that point, puts responsibility back on the club and the managers to increase workplace. So some of the comments that you see below, deliverable action, one of them that we've received common is our schedule comes out a day before the work week starts. And when that happens, and it might just be something that you don't think of, it's been going on in the club for years, it's just been standard practice, but when you see that actually come to fruition and come forward on an employee survey, you start to think, hey, what is that actually doing? And if you boil it down, it's almost like saying, we're not thinking about your outside life. We're just here to work. But by providing that schedule 3 days earlier, it gives them, or 4 days earlier, it gives them the ability to focus on other parts of their life, get appointments, maybe have a second job if need to, or most importantly, spend time with their family. So again, putting that responsibility back on the manager, saying, hey, let's make sure to strive to get that schedule out 3 days beforehand. Obviously, busy times like Christmas or spring break down in the Florida clubs might be a little harder, but making that commitment to the staff will go far. Also, some deliverable things that you can get from surveys. We see that employee meals are ranked the lowest out of employee benefits for satisfaction, and they're one of the most important. And when you think about that, that represents, through our research, we found that represents 10% of your benefits expense, your overall benefits expense, which is a huge chunk. It's the 3rd largest benefit that you're providing to the staff besides medical insurance and payroll taxes. But something about increasing the employee meals, putting a little more attention to it in detail. And if you think about it, everything in life has showed us that family and friendship and everything revolves around meals and food. So being able to provide a little bit better of employee meals, bringing the staff together for their break where they're all sitting around, creates a better environment, ultimately creates engagement, and shows that you're committed to them. Another thing that sticks out to us that we've heard is training and communication between staff, especially cross-department training. So if somebody, you have a front desk attendant that might work in the clubhouse and also help out at fitness, do they have the proper tools and the communication they need to facilitate that job to their utmost possibility, to answer any question they have? So focusing in on training and communication between all employees can definitely help. And these are things that you can take away to increase workplace and enhance workplace culture.
And Mike, I just want to comment because this is a really important slide on a couple of those things. The second point about the club staff, and I want to reiterate what Mike said there, and what we have found in our research is that, and this happened, I was standing at a focus group, and there was a gentleman at Gray Oaks whose name is Danian, and Danian is a clubhouse manager or dining room manager. And we had 30 folks who were doing a focus group, and Danian was standing behind me at the podium, and we went around the room, and we asked them why the members had joined the club. And we probably had 10 people answer that question, and out of the 10, 5 of them pointed to Danian behind me and said, hey, the reason we joined this club was because of the experience that Danian provided us. as we came in. And when I heard that as a manager, I was thinking, yeah, that was nice. They were, Damien was in the room and they're being nice to him. But as we've taken the survey and the motivation survey and put it out to see why members across the country have joined, I was really surprised that the reason that the members joined was the current staff. And as Mike said, that was even before they have a chance to develop the relationship. It was about the welcoming and the friendly culture that the staff brings. And as we know, if membership is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to us, we need to focus on the staff engagement in order to help us sell memberships. The other thing is, if you know that that's true, we need to get the potential members and the new members to interact with the staff and create opportunities for them to do that. The 3 deliverable actions on the bottom of that statement, when Mike showed me that 10% of my benefit cost was employee meal, as a manager who's been in the business for 30 years, I was really surprised that that was that high, and I did not know that. And one of the things when we have a culture of employees from different countries and we have people that have different meal periods, I would challenge all the managers to look at that experience that we're providing, because we see across the country that that's one of the most important benefits. And from a soft benefit, it is the most important benefit to our employees. So if we're serving our employees leftover meals from the family buffet the night before, or if we're serving from a cultural standpoint food that doesn't equate to country of origin, if we have foreign workers working with us, or if we can create opportunities on the positive side to do the cookouts and really create an experience that is something that we really want to focus on. And then I want to focus on the communication between the staff, the cross-department element also. It's a reoccurring theme in all of our surveys that communication between departments is not very strong. So you can utilize the meal period to strengthen that, but also I think it's important that you create cross-functional teams. We've seen that can make a difference, and share with that when we do our all employee get-togethers. I think we, as an industry, we do a really good job of communicating to our staff what's going on, but they would like to interact with the other departments and really look forward to improve your engagement by creating opportunities where the departments can work with each other, because that's important to the employees. And as Mike said on the schedule, really evaluate how you're doing the schedule. We know that work-life balance is much more important to our employees who are generally younger. And if we're not giving them the time to plan that other part of their life, they will not be as engaged as other people.
Awesome. So now to look at the financial impact of employee engagement, or really disengagement. So as we all know, it's a tight labor market and hiring's been very tough. Through our research, we found some key things. So looking at Cornell's research, they're able to calculate on average what the cost of one employee turnover may be. So they were able to come up with $6,704 for every employee turnover, and that's mainly line item employees. If you think about the top 6 execs, there's been research showing that that can be somewhere between 3 to 6 months worth their salary to that extent. So doing some quick math and looking at it just to show you briefly, the median club has 104 employees, full-time equivalent employees. And to calculate full-time equivalent employees, you take the total number of hours worked by everybody in your club, divide that by 2080, which is a 52 40-hour work week, and that's how you calculate your full-time equivalent employees. I know that because of ADA, they have a different calculation for the total number of work hours, but that's how SHRM and the Federal Business Bureau goes by it. So if you take the 104, we have all staff turnover rate in the industry at 34%, also in our research. So if you take 104 FTEs times the 34%, on average you have 35 employees turning over annually. And so then if you multiply that 35 by the 6,700, you get the $234,000 that your company is essentially losing every year from the turnover. And then also at the end of this, we do have something that we will be sharing through this service, this platform that we have. We have a document that can help you actually calculate what the cost is for every employee turnover. Because what goes into your employee turnover cost is recruitment, is training, is time for the upper management to do all the training, and also the time that was lost by the employee. So we do have a sheet that we will be sharing with everybody at the end that can actually help you calculate what the cost per every employee turnover is to hopefully start to strategically manage this expense. And to drill down a little deeper and to add some context into that. So what you're looking at here, this line represents all clubs in the industry with golf. This is their net operating result. So the median club pretty much breaks even at $66,000 a year. And if you're looking at if your club is on average losing about $234,000 a year, and majority of clubs are just breaking even, by reducing that turnover rate by down to 30% or even half, you could be swaying and changing the dial of your operating result above to be over 100 to be 200,000 if you are reducing it by half. And also that could bring almost another quarter of clubs above a negative loss. So we could, if we were able to reduce it all around as an industry, all of a sudden you could have 35% or 75% of the industry actually breaking even.
Yeah, Mike, just to add to that too, the other side of that also is, and and we talk about the annual turnover rate of being 34%. We know in the research that hospitality industries generally operate at a high turnover rate. I've seen it as high as 60 to 100% in some of the research. But if that rate, not only if you reduced it by 50%, but if you're on the higher end of that, if your turnover rate is in the 40 or 50% range, you could see that it could be costing the club in excess of $300,000 or $350,000. The other thing is if you have more than 104 employees, then that number also goes up. So one of the things that we want you to recognize is, number one, understand what your annual turnover rate is. And then number two, come up with, and we'll provide you the tool, come up with what those soft costs are and what those hard costs are, and start to budget it and start to measure it, because it can make the difference between the club meeting their operating results or the club not meeting their operating results.
Awesome. All right, so to dig a little deeper into employee engagement. So from that excerpt earlier that I read to you, this is from the same research done by MIT right here in Boston. So they focus on 5 buckets. These buckets, you see employee satisfaction, emotion, commitment, loyalty, and performance. And so you'll see a lot of surveys out there that focus on engagement, satisfaction, all that. And we have a lot of clubs that have come and talked to us and said, hey, we did the Crane survey, employee survey. It's awesome, it's great, but it's not applicable. It's not exactly actionable. I had another club say, hey, we did the Washington Post one. Again, not necessarily applicable. It doesn't really help us out. So through our research, what we've tried to do is boil this down and make it all applicable. We're really bridging the gap between the academic side of employee engagement to a practicality sense for clubs. And so what you see there down the bottom is what our club benchmarking survey model is. So we have 6 different buckets or components: my role, my department, my supervisor, my club, my benefits, and my feedback. And there's little bits of all of those buckets from MIT that are represented in ours. So there's a few satisfaction questions, which you'll see in the next slide. You'll see some emotional questions, commitment and benefits, the loyalty and benefits into my club. Net Promoter Score question, which we'll get into later, is a representation of loyalty. Emotion, again, on feedback and performance in my club and my department. So we really try to capture as much as we could from our research and put it more in a practical sense for the club industry. So looking at that a little deeper, this is an example of one of the reports you get back if you were to do a survey. What you see here on the left would be the club, on the right is the industry. These numbers have been changed a little bit just so they're not too actionable, so please don't take these back and compare any of your scores if you have your own surveys. But what you can see there is you can match up the first bucket from MIT, satisfaction. The fifth question over, I'm satisfied with my job. You have performance, my job is challenging and rewarding. Emotion, my job is meaningful. Adding that engagement side and really summing it all together. So a few things to take away from what we found, again, from the research. These are some components that you should look for if you are doing a survey, and that we think are extremely essential to be on your thought process. So a few things. Club-specific surveys are really important. Like we talked about before, you could do surveys anywhere through Gallup or through Washington Post or your own. You could do your own survey if you want through SurveyMonkey. But you always want to answer one question. What is this question going to give me? What's actionable about this? So by getting a club-specific survey, it will make a heck of a lot of difference. Third-party administered, that's a huge benefit for anonymity for the staff. So they don't feel like all the results are going right back to the GM or the HR director, and they feel they're able to be more honest and actually put in the feedback that you actually want. Frequency too, understanding when's the right time to do the surveys. Is your club kind of struggling a little bit, and maybe quarterly is the best thing to do so you can actually track it. Is it biannually, and maybe I talked to one club that does 50% of their staff at one half of the year and the other 50% of the staff at one half of the year, and they mix it up. So they're not serving them too much, or are things going really well that you're really looking for an annual basis. Another thing that you want is context. So industry benchmarks, you could ask that question before, am I satisfied in my current role? And you get an average score of 3.8. Great. Do you think that's good? Do I think that's good? We don't actually know. So having context to be able to understand if other places in your area, where they fall, but also in the industry. And that's much like everything else that we do at the company. Also through our research, there's difference of opinion depending on what role you're in. If you are a manager or a non-manager, manager is more focused or could be more focused on a career and advancement, whereas you have a line level employee or somebody off for summer and from college and is just there for a paycheck. So understanding that there are two different opinions and being able to most effectively capture them. And then lastly, getting tailored reports to your clubs. You don't want to get a canned report that just kind of tells you, oh, here are your results. Because we know every club's different. Every club has its own awesome culture to it, its own membership and its own staff. So you want a report that's going to be best delivered to you that, again, is going to be actionable and that you can use to strategically plan and enhance your workplace culture.
Mike, could you talk about, in any research, there's qualitative research and quantitative research, and many surveys are quantitative, which means that there's numbers associated with them. You've looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of write-in comments, which are the qualitative comments from employees. How important do you think that the qualitative information is to research, and what have you seen from that, from your experience in administering so many of them?
Yeah, and I truly think the qualitative comments or the results are some of the best results or the meat of the surveys. That's where you get the best feedback. And you saw the three examples earlier about the schedule, employee meals, and about communication in the departments. You really can capture some of the best things from that. We've also played around with word clouds, which takes the most popular words in a text box question and shows you some of the more used and more prominent words. So something like communication popped up for one club, and employee meals popped up for another one. So you really get the most results from those.
And then, Mike, what would you recommend a club to do a survey one time or once a year, or what's the importance of doing multiple surveys or multiple times a year? How can a manager use that to their advantage to enhance job engagement?
Yep. So we've also started to administer a few quarterly surveys for clubs too. The benefit of that is actually tracking any initiatives you can put in place. So again, create that bench line, do your first survey, and understand where you are. Even if you think the results are terrible, you don't know where you were before, if they were good or bad. So you need a baseline or a benchmark to start from. And from there, you work with managers and you come up and you work with the staff too, most importantly, to create plans and initiatives. And the only way you know if those initiatives are working is depending on the frequency of the surveys. So doing it either quarterly, maybe again, if the club is in somewhat of a rough spot, being able to do it quarterly and track it, you can actually maintain those initiatives, or you can do it biannually. Again, I was talking to another club that they do 50% of the staff one half and 50% of the other half. Yeah.
And what's some of the differences between, as we have on the slide here, between the managers and the non-managers? Do they have different points of view, and should you survey them differently or use the same survey?
Awesome. So we have two different surveys, or we found that there's two different opinions on line level versus managers. Again, one of those could be career. We've also separated questions about board of directors. You happen to see more managers work with the board of directors. Yes, the servers all know who the board of directors are, or they should. If they don't, that's your first thing to focus on. But managers tend to work with the board of directors more frequently on a strategic sense. So we try to capture if the managers or if the board lets them put stuff in place and then have the managers strategically do the daily operations. There are some other questions about, for the employees, we focus on the department as a whole versus the managers. You might be the only manager in the department. So we focus on the management team as a whole. With staff meetings and the efficiency in staff meetings. So there definitely is two different opinions that are worthwhile to capture. Also benefits too. You might have different benefits offering for your managers versus the hourly employees. So that's a different area too that you want to capture the difference of opinion.
Yeah, I noticed, I'm sure everybody else did too, that Walmart, which is one of the largest private employers, and they hire people for between $10 and $11 an hour today, extended education for their employees in those entry-level jobs. I don't know the exact details of that, but there's an employer many times on the golf courses or in the kitchens. We're hiring people in that $10 to $15 range, and now the benefit package across the country is going up because Walmart's offering education on that. So that's great. The other thing, Mike, that is that we're also doing some research on the culture that the members create. So as we know, the members in many cases own the club. So therefore, the culture that they create in that ownership and that interaction that they have with the employees is important and is measurable as we go through that.
Yeah, to add to the Walmart thing, I believe they're offering college for $1 a day for areas of retail management and assembly line management.
Yeah, two tough jobs to hire, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to build off of some of our research goals and considerations, at the beginning of this process, we started doing a lot of research. Okay, where do we start? All research is built off of prior research. We found that there is 0 to none in our industry. Any research on hospitality and engagement focused mainly on hotels and restaurants. which majority of them are decades old, from the 90s, early 2000s. So from that, and much like everything in our company, we continue to evolve. We want to be data miners and try to represent some more of the information for our industry. So at the moment, we do have some ongoing employer research going on. We have a set of questions that are all research backed. We're in the middle of doing a Delphi group, which we have a group of individuals that are some of the leading industry professionals with experience and knowledge, and we're getting feedback, and they represented all departments from fitness, tennis, food and beverage, grounds, and front of house. General and administrative. So right now we're doing a test group with them, and then ultimately we'll do some trial sample studies with trying to get a sample size of over 500 employees. And all of this really is to provide valid and reliable data, research-backed data for the industry, because again, there is none. And what this ultimately will boil down to is a predictive model that can actually tell you where and what components make up engagement in the club industry and if your employees are engaged.
All right, this is my slide. So once your eyes get focused, just a couple definitions that I want to go through. And I didn't know, Mike mentioned Google Scholar, and Scholar being Scholar. We all are very familiar with Google, but for the academic world, there's a thing called Google Scholar. It's free, and if you just type in Google Scholar in your browser, it will come up. But on Google Scholar is all of the academic and business research that gets published in the industry, and almost anything that you can imagine is published. So the first time that Mike and I heard that job satisfaction is not statistically significant to performance, I stepped back and said, I'd really like to see who did the study on that and to come up with that, because many of us in the industry believe that satisfaction is statistically significant to performance. So we went to Google Scholar. This particular article is called Job Engagement, and its antecedents and effects on job performance. And it's out of the Academy of Management Journal, and it's by Bruce Rich and Jeffrey Lapine and Ian Crawford out of the University of Florida. And as you look at this chart on the bottom left, you can see the p-value with the star next to it being less than 0.05% on the bottom left there by the arrow. And what that means is anything that has a little star by it is statistically significant. So in the middle of the chart where you see job engagement, and then job involvement, and then job satisfaction and intrinsic motivation, what they did was look at those four areas as mediators between value, perceived organizational support, and core self-values on the left in order to measure performance and organizational behavior on the right. And what you can see, if you look at the arrow between job engagement up in the middle of the chart and that line that goes to task performance at 0.25, and you can see there's an asterisk next to that. And then the line between job engagement and behavior at 0.27 has an asterisk behind it. So what that says is that job engagement at a 95% confidence level impacts performance and behavior. If we go to job satisfaction and we look at job satisfaction as it goes to performance, and as it goes at 0.14, you see there's no asterisk. And at the line that goes from job satisfaction to behavior at 0.15 doesn't have an asterisk. And if you read that article, what it says, and the most important takeaway of that is that an engaged employee has more impact on performance and organizational behavior than does job satisfaction. And I think we all know that intuitively, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying, because we're not saying that job satisfaction has no effect on that. We all know that that's from a practical standpoint isn't true. But we also know that when we get employees engaged, and we got one, Mike's one of those that club benchmarking, or Terry, or almost, everybody that works there, and you have them in your own organizations, they're willing to put an effort, and they represent the brand to a level much higher than just a satisfied employee. And in an industry where it's so competitive, we have to raise our game on engagement. And many clubs are doing a fantastic job on that. But it starts with trying to measure it, trying to know where your benchmark is, right, and have a starting point. The most important survey, in our opinion, is not the first one, right? The most important one is the second one, because then you can start to measure some of the things that you're trying and see if they're working, and seeing if you can improve that engagement. If you only do a survey once and you don't provide any context on that, it's not nearly as meaningful as if you incorporate that into your day-to-day business activity. So I would encourage everybody, even if you're not a researcher, to understand that on Google Scholar you have research on almost any topic you want, and if you're looking to support your views or to challenge some of your views, you can find a lot of information on that. And we're engaged in that research on a daily basis, as Mike says, and we'll continue to develop our research base in order to enhance the job engagement as this particular figure shows.
All right, so to go over some actual insights now that you can do or start to look at inwards to enhance your employee engagement. So again, looking at those 5 buckets from MIT, so looking at satisfaction, a few things you can do around satisfaction. If you find somebody that's not too satisfied in their job or doesn't seem to be enjoying it, think about realigning some responsibilities. Maybe adding a few responsibilities or cross-training them to do a different department, whether that's a assistant server, moving them to a server, or vice versa, or a line employee in the kitchen. Start to mix it up, and it not only increases their satisfaction, but also increases their knowledge and your commitment to them. Instilling a mentorship program, again, having that supervisor and that intern or a server working together and meeting maybe fairly regularly to go over certain things. And then looking back into any incentive programs that you have regarding performance. Looking at emotion, you can start to reinforce again their ownership in the club culture, whether that's through surveys or a box that says suggestions or whatnot. Reiterate in your employee meetings, telling them, hey, this club culture will only enhance with your feedback. Help us make this a better place for you. Totally suggest new ideas, developments. One thing I heard the other day was, have everybody vote on a new holiday that the club supports or gets together for, and then it's a barbecue or something like that. For commitment, communicating and reiterating the club's goals and visions to them, sharing with them, making sure that they know so they can take ownership in that as well, and have the confidence to follow through your goals and your visions. Reassuring how integral they are in achieving the club's success. Again, in the member loyalty and satisfaction, how important they are for your member satisfaction in your service. And then also looking at your work environment, rewards and benefit structures too, regarding commitment. For loyalty, you can provide different education, career advancements, and that doesn't have to be some big course like an MBA. Something as simple, I heard a company did the other day, they arranged English classes for the employees that weren't as prominent in English, and they invited their families to come. So they set up a class where people can come and learn English, not only to help them work in their environment, but also show them that you're committed to increasing their outside life and their family. You're committed to them. Another thing I read this morning was some bigger companies are also helping with student loan debt, because some 70% of millennials all have student loan debt. I know that might be a little harder for clubs to kind of fit in, but there's so many creative ways to show your commitment and your loyalty to your employees where they'll also be loyal back. Open up new development for initiative and families as well. Also with performance, so update and involve training programs. If you don't follow Gallup News, they released like 5 new articles today, all on Gallup in the workplace, and there are some great things. And so one of the biggest things is evolving training programs, looking back into that, revisiting performance reviews, identifying how effective the process is, and also if the appropriate feedback is going back to the employee. Don't treat that just like something you have to get out of the way, but also do that either more frequently, or make sure that the feedback is getting back to the employee so they can only better themselves as an employee. Another thing you can look into is your recruiting policy too. Assess where you're getting people from, and also your interview questions. Are you actually asking the right interview questions that is helping you figure out who the employees are and if they fit your policy and your club culture? So another thing we're looking into is employee net promoter score. So this is something created by Bain and Company. All the research back in this shows it goes back to loyalty in a company. So if you've taken a flight recently, or maybe have stayed at a hotel recently, you probably received an email shortly after saying, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? And so this is a quick way to capture your employee net promoter score, or your the loyalty in your clients. You can also do this with your members. And so what we show here is they're starting to do research on the correlation of customer net promoter scores and employee net promoter scores, and seeing where that falls. From our research so far that we've done, our employee net promoter score for the industry is 9.02, with the highest being 100 and the lowest being negative 100. So they're right at the middle. And then for managers, right at 25. They say between 0 to 50 is good, but 50 and above is excellent. So how do we focus in on doing this to start increasing this? And this is a great, easy way to capture it for your staff and your members. This also...
I just say, Mike, on that employee net promoter score, that is a loyalty question. So we talk about employee loyalty, and it's an easy survey because it's only one question on that. And as Mike said, as an industry, as we can see against the other ones that we're competing against, we need as an industry to raise that up higher to make sure that the talent level wants to come into the club market.
So here are a few takeaways besides that 2 slides above, with some things that you can look inwards and start to assess your own culture. So the top one, we are going to distribute to you right now a document where you can actually start to figure out the soft and hard costs of your employee turnover. Again, like Jim mentioned before, that's one way that you can start to budget for that. Also, we will include a sample enhancement plan. Something like this will be included actually with the video next week. But what this can do is help you look inwards again on those enhancements I was talking about 2 slides ago. Look at it, create a plan, and then come up with a strategic way to instill those initiatives, to hold people accountable, to put responsibility on the employees, but also the managers. So we'll have that to send around as well. And then also, we are offering to do free employee net promoter scores to clubs. So again, like Jim just mentioned, this is a 1-question survey that we can administer very easily to your staff. And it's a great way to quickly capture the loyalty and where they fall. So if that's something you're interested, you can reach out to it, and it'll take probably 5 minutes of your time to get this quick snapshot of how your employees feel. From that, we will take any questions you may have. Here are the codes for the 4 chapters that joined us. We do really appreciate your time today. We actually know that some clubs actually took the time to devote their department head meetings to this, so it just shows that the information and the feedback that we get from you guys is powerful and awesome. So if you have any questions on the right side of the pane, you can ask them, and we're happy to take any questions.
I only have one question at the moment. Now 2 questions asking for, well, the first one asked for the sample turnover report, the worksheet. What we're going to do is send a follow-up email. We recorded this session, and the email will include a link to the recording so you can replay the video. It will include the worksheet, information about that opportunity to have an employee net promoter score done. And what's the other document, Mike?
The
Worksheet.
enhancement
Oh, and a
plan.
sample report, a sample action plan.
Yep, correct.
Next question is, do you have an engagement survey template that we can use for an employee survey or employee survey examples? And I think Mike can answer that. I think he has a sample report.
I do have sample reports and I do have some sample questions. You can reach out to me after, and I'd be happy to kind of guide you if you were looking to put together your own survey.
Um, what do I do if employees do not want to get involved? We try to have appreciation events, but employees do not seem interested.
Yeah, I
Um,
think,
yep.
Terry, this is Jim. I think on that, I think you got to find the people within your organization to be the cheerleaders on that and drive people forward on that, and then create the opportunities for them to do that. The other thing that I have found effective is if you do cross-functional teams and put them in charge of the event so that it's not management doing that. It's a great opportunity to get the departments to work together, and it's hard for the employees to ignore their other employees as opposed to the management, and that's a very effective strategy. And I kept Mike up there. So, Mike, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was only going to add that it might be also good to add that in a survey too, and start to understand why they're not coming up. What suggestions do they have? And you can be blunt with it, saying if we're investing our time and money into this, and you're not showing up. So, what can we do to provide one of the most impactful employee appreciation parties as we can?
Yeah, the other thing we did, Terry, which I know many of the clubs do, and they do it very effectively, is have the employee recognition breakfast, where they do self nominations from the employees, nominate their fellow employees, and then you come to breakfast with the managers and the management. I can tell you firsthand, that's very emotional. And when one of the employees stands up and tells stories about the other employees in a small group with all the with their department managers there, in some cases the board members there, people get very emotional about it because they take so much pride in their work, and that's a really effective way of enhancing engagement.
Here's probably I think a Jim question. With your research, what is the main challenge to engage teams in the club industry versus retail industry?
I can't speak against the retail because I've never looked at that. I'll look at that if you can find out who answered that, and I'll respond that. But the main challenge on engagement is starting with the motivation, is finding what is motivating people to work. We all work for different reasons. So what we have found is that because we generally don't know what that reason is in an industry, because we don't ask why people are working at the club, therefore it's hard to personalize career jobs and opportunities, and that's why we would suggest, and our research would verify this, that the motivating factors of why people are working is really important. And then secondly, finding good managers. I mean, we know good managers can impact 70% of the enhancement. So therefore, it's critical that your supervisor and or managers understand the employees that are working for them. And that's hard, right? This is the people business that we're in, and taking care of your staff and all their needs. They're all different, and many of them have many different motivations, and it's up to us as leaders and managers to find out what that is, and then making sure that we satisfy that.
Yeah, it's actually a great question, and it kind of points to what Mike was saying, which is you have to start with this with talking to the existing employees to find out where they're at, why they came to work there, what they enjoy in their job, and then take that insight to action. And Mike also made the point about looking at where you're recruiting and how you're recruiting, and what works really well. Look at your best, brightest, most enthusiastic, most engaged employee. What was their story? What was their path into that experience?
Exactly.
Okay, I think we are right just past the hour, and I don't see any other questions, but you can see there on the screen there's an email address for Mike Morin and for Jim Butler. And if you have a question afterwards, feel free to send it, or if you have questions about any of the documents, I will hopefully have those out to you tomorrow. But Mike's also available by phone, and Jim is about to get on an airplane. I sent an apology earlier for someone who mentioned the audio quality. We have Mike in our Boston office in the Back Bay, and Jim is sitting at Logan Airport getting ready to board a plane. So if you'd like to talk to Mike, you can reach him at that phone number. And we thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.